Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from, I guess. My name is Spencer Wolf. I'm the marketing manager here at ZeroFOX. I spend my days working with our customers on some of the challenges that we'll be talking about in the next half an hour, 45 minutes or so. And I'm very excited to let Reed Robinson from Hootsuite introduce himself. Thank you, Reed, for joining us.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Great. So why don't we go ahead and get started. We're going to go through the agenda really quick. We're going to start with the status quo, talking about some of the things that you probably see nowadays, the state of social media security and how employees use social media today in most organizations that we work with. And then we're going to dive into employee advocacy from two different perspectives, both from the brand perspective and the security perspective. We're going to run through a couple case studies, and then we'll end with best practices and QA. So let's start hopefully with something very easy. This is going to be what's going on at the majority of companies. And hopefully we can all agree on the following, but your employees are on social media. This is simply a fact of life for most organizations in this day and age. The average person has 5.5 social media accounts, and they will spend in their life 5 years and 4 months on social media. I think this was only second to television, and social media is fast on the rise. So whether it's at work, at home, your employees use social media, and they spend an incredible amount of time on social media. And obviously, marketers know this. So marketers love social media for some obvious reasons. This should be hopefully another thing that we can all agree on here. The ease of use. You don't have to rely on a web developer to create a page. You know, you can spin up a Facebook page in 15 minutes. The cost is incredibly low. You know, using Facebook advertising, Twitter advertising, LinkedIn advertising, it's one of the cheapest sources of impressions for any marketer across the globe. The global scale is pretty incredible, so you can reach customer bases that you never were able to before, simply because of just how many people use social media. You can build trust and relationships with customers, with employees. You can engage with those customers, and of course, you can actually grow your customer base. So it's something like next year, I think CMOs plan to spend 25 to 30% of their entire budgets on social media. So the point being here is that it's a growing space. This hopefully should be all of us on the call here, and this is the status quo of what your business on social media looks like. Now, I have to play a little bit of bad cop here. I'm going to let Reed do all of the benefits of social media, but unfortunately, I have to tell you some of the risks first. So we're going to start with some of the risks. So for all those same reasons that marketers love social media and why your employees love social media, well, so do bad guys, so do cyber criminals, so do scammers. So just like your marketing team can spin up a Facebook page in 15 minutes, well, so can a hacker spin up an impersonation or a spoofed account of one of your executives, one of your brands. You know, the difficulty of doing it is completely trivial. So it lowers the barrier to cyber criminals across the globe. Likewise for cyber criminals, the cost is much lower than ever before. The scale is global. They can basically profile your entire organization with nothing more than a LinkedIn query, find out what their target may be, and go after that target anywhere on earth. They will also build trust relationships with both customers and employees to launch any sort of attack. So this is a very, very common tactic that an attacker on social media will use. They'll make sure that you think they're someone else, whether that's a prospective employee, whether that's the CFO of the company, and that trust really helps them get in the door when they're trying to deploy something not so nice. And of course, they can actually deliver those attacks via social media as well. So whether that's via direct message or mentioning their potential victim in a post, there's 101 different ways an attacker can actually launch these attacks once they've found and pinpointed their victim. And this is really on the rise. So just like social media for marketers has been, you know, the skyrocketing trend in the past 5 to 10 years, likewise with cybercrime. So recent reports from Intel and Symantec put social media as the #1 place where employees report experiencing cybercrime. This means it surpassed things like email, which we usually think of as pretty common methods of attack. And 40% of victims have fallen victim to cybercrime. Another 40% accept unknown friend requests, according to Symantec. And this is a surprising number simply because we've done a good job in the security space of trying to pin down training for things like email, known attack vectors, but social media, it has a kind of a different level of trust that makes it tricky. So your employees are on social media, your marketers are on social media, and unfortunately there are these risks that are out there. So what do some of these risks actually look like? We mentioned a few, but malicious links like malware or ransomware getting sent to your employees, fake and counterfeit goods. So this either can be diluting your brand or targeted at your employees to click on something that they should not be clicking on. There's, of course, the trend of account hijacking that we've seen a lot of lately. So an account actually gets taken over and starts to tweet things that you would not want it to be tweeting. This happens both to celebrities, which we see in the news all the time, but it also happens to things like brand pages or employee pages. So this can cause a lot of problems when an employee is compromised. And all of a sudden they start sending direct messages to other people in the employee with the same phishing link that leads to account compromises on their end as well. Fraud and scams, of course, abound on social media. These can target your employees. And there are also these global security events. So we've seen this in the news lately, but something like a Yahoo breach or a LinkedIn breach exposing passwords across the board. So this causes a huge problem to organizations who are trying to keep their employees safe on social media. So these are some of the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and some of the things that your employees, whether they are on the corporate network or at home, see all the time. And so, again, I have to be a bit of the scare tactic guy here. Here are some of the things that we see right and left that can target your employees on social media. I'm going to give it over to Reed now. Hopefully he can play good cop here for a second. He's going to talk about a few more of the brand risks that your employees can cause to your organization, but then hopefully we can get into some of the actual opportunity of your employees using social media, not just the risks. So, Reed, I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that answer. And, it's not just about, good cop, bad cop. I think it's also just about, being aware of everything that's out there. I think one of the things that we've seen in working with a lot of companies is, they have employees who are super eager to be on social and even start representing their brand. And what we've noticed is that as you start doing that, as employees start to become more active on social media, and even as brands start to become more active, that's also where you start to become more of a risk as well. Because, inherently, and it's not only about what they're doing and what they're saying on social media, but it's also a large part about, they become higher targets, and so does the brand become more of a target. That is, if you, talk about in your profile how you work for, a law firm or a finance company, you become, really easy to potentially start to target for phishing attacks, which is what, what Spencer was talking about of, them giving you a fake Google Drive website, and then you enter your credentials for Google Drive, and next thing you know, some unauthorized person has access to your company data. So there's definitely, those risks there that we want to make sure that everyone's aware of and that you're addressing properly, especially the more sensitive the organization becomes to security and IT risks. But on the flip side, when we talk on brand risk, there's also, a massive, area there where you want to just keep an eye on. Now, I know when we work with employees, we always like to assume that everybody's a smart individual, they're not going to do anything silly, but the truth of the matter is that, there's a lot of lapses in judgment that happen every day, and we want to make sure that everything that employees are doing remains on brand, compliance, if you're in those verticals that require compliance guidelines, and that everything's just, not inappropriate. I mean, there's been famous examples time and time again, whether those are, compliance violations or, people doing, I remember Justine here on the bottom left, this one was pretty sad. I remember, I think the big thing came with like, was it hashtag did Justine land yet? Because she was on a flight from England over to Africa or something like that, and it was pretty bad for the brand by the time she made it there. And it really could be one of those things that you're really easy to discover, whether it's on, a number of ways we have to protect that. But all that being said, it's important to remember why you're getting your employees on social and the opportunity that's there to really present your brand in a positive light and start moving that conversation forward. And overall, there's been a lot of research that's been done in this on the opportunity that exists here. I know Edelman did a great report on really just how important is it to get your employees sharing information about your company. And it's really because, the strongest relationships are going to be built between people, and your social media, your marketing teams are not going to be able to do everything alone. They're going to need to get some of that help. And that help can come from people that are most invested in your company's success, people who know the company, people who care about it, and people who want to build those relationships there. And that's really, where we want to start talking about how advocacy can be important for your business, because those are the people that understand it, they want to share stuff. And so you want to make sure that you empower your employees to really focus their conversations on their audience that they've built up and not just the one that marketing thinks about. And this is really, where you can start to see a lot of success across multiple departments. So it's not just in marketing, but where you could bring in recruiting, where you could talk about sales and everything there. And, we have seen companies seeing massive success across the board here, whether it's, just seeing how much further a single piece of content is able to make it when you get, those employees engaged with that. And also keeping in mind, and we've done this analysis even internally, one of the crazy things is just the difference in audiences. With your marketing team, you have your built-out Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn properties. You're always reaching that audience. You're not really, you can gain new followers and stuff, but it's really that core audience that you've built up as a brand. One of the great things about leveraging your employees and empowering them to share the brand message is the fact that they have a completely new audience of people that may not have even learned much about the brand. They might not even know that they have a friend or family member who works for that company. And so it's great to be able to leverage that. We've seen research, and it really is this high that about almost well over 90% of your employees' network, people in the network, are brand new, and they're not following the brand on its corporate accounts. And they're much more likely to engage with that. Even if we look at, what happens with that content, it really goes quite a long way. And the benefits are not just on the content. It also helps lead to more engaged employees. Time and time again, I'm sure you've read research about how do you keep employees engaged? Why are they staying at the company? Why are they potentially leaving the company? And what are those ways that we can help build a stronger culture that has a positive impact on things like employee satisfaction and retention numbers? And what we found is advocacy is a great way to keep employees up to date with what's happening in the company, what type of exciting events they're attending, news that they're sharing. And I'd say this is probably most pertinent the larger your company grows, because if you have a global business where you have employees in 25 offices and you have a ton of remote employees as well, it becomes really easy to lose track of what's happening internally. Even from Hootsuite, we're a 1,000-person company with, I think, about 10 offices now, and it feels sometimes, if I didn't have an app where people were uploading pictures of what they were doing in their life and events that we're attending and the impact we're making in areas like Singapore and London, in Turkey, I would never feel that we were really having much of a presence out there. So it's a great way to share with your employees that they're part of something larger than just the day-to-day job that they're involved with. And that's really, I think, to highlight the opportunity that's in it for your individual employees and why we get excited about that. And I think that's where, with Spencer and I, we talked a lot about that good cop, bad cop, and in prefacing the difference between what it is for the risks that are out there, just so that you're aware of them and that you're positioning everything properly. We know when working with financial services, healthcare organizations, public sector companies, law firms, that those areas have, quite a lot of risk that can potentially be relevant for them that they just need to be able to address. So whenever you're positioning an advocacy solution to your company, you should also be prepared to talk about how it's not only that we want to do all those benefits and things that Reed was telling me on that webinar, but I also want to be able to talk to how this is adding another layer of security to the firm. Because today, I guarantee you, your employees are on social, they're talking about your company, they're saying they work for your company, so it's giving you much greater visibility into how they're doing all of that. And now, when we look at the impact that advocacy can have, we talked about how it gets further reach. We talked about how employees want to share it, but I wanted to share a quick example of just how quick that reach can really explode in that exponential growth. So we built out a quick example here. Now, if you're an average company that's done a great job on social across time, your social audience might look something at the top here across your own channels. And feel free to do a similar calculation yourself. You'll be surprised at the results. So if you have 500 fans on Facebook and a couple thousand across Twitter and LinkedIn, your total reach that you really have there is 7,000 people. Whereas if you look at just leveraging 350 employees who have a pretty modest following, 350 friends on Facebook, 75 Twitter, and even just 300 LinkedIn connections, leads you to a potential reach of over 245,000. It's an absurd multiple over what you have from a brand level that's sitting there at your fingertips. There are people that want to share content. And the best part about this is a lot of the research that Edelman and Nielsen has done, where we look at the fact that people actually trust content that's coming from people they know, it's coming from friends, it's coming from family, it's coming from their past coworkers, versus when you look at content that's coming from a brand. People are always a bit skeptical of that, whereas if it's coming from someone they know, they're going to trust it. So it's not only do you have the expanded reach, but you also have a much greater experience with those users. And at Hootsuite here, we did a similar fun example. If you look at our social presence across Twitter, LinkedIn, everything there, we have well over 7 million followers. And so we did a fun test where we compared a post, and I believe it was actually a job posting that we had, looking for a new position to fill. And so we compared that same post with what happened when 300 people, and we shared it to our internal audience of a couple hundred employees, and about 300 people were able to share that post. And we saw a massive difference. We integrate with obviously things like Google Analytics so that we can track some deeper level analytics here. And we were able to track that we drove almost twice the amount of sessions and close to 3 times the amount of click-through rates that we were getting on the site when people were coming through our advocacy channels as opposed to when they were coming from our corporate side. So it just goes to show you that even if you have 7 million followers on things like Twitter, leveraging a small group of your employees who have those connections can really help bolster the messaging that your brand's doing. And now, we talk a lot about advocacy and how you can use it and the benefits that are going to get there, but sometimes it becomes a little bit too, pie in the sky, and we need to take things back home a little bit to how it's actually going to impact your business and your employees. And we see it really having a crucial role in 4 key areas. The first, is definitely internal communication. Same lines with keeping employees engaged. It's around increasing efficiencies for your organization and employee engagement, just making sure that people are up to date with what's going on, seeing what events they're attending, just exciting things that are happening in the company. We find that to be some of actually the most engaged content we get. Is when people are sharing what they do. And at Hootsuite, we use a hashtag here called #HootsuiteLife so that people are seeing what's going on there. And that comes to the next area, which is really that content amplification. I think this is that really simple one that, you're trying to drive traffic back to the website. You're trying to get people to engage with your content. And, a side shoot of this is that we've seen organizations actually have to reduce a little bit of what they're doing on paid social as well, because they're able to leverage other channels. So they're comparing the opportunity cost that they have across those 2 channels to see what's going on. And similarly, I think that third area, and it's one that I focus on a lot with some organizations in the spaces that we talked about, is social selling. How can we make sure that we're getting tools, that help our sellers look like the experts that we know they are across all of those social channels? So we want to make sure that they're engaged with the right prospects, they're sharing content that's relevant to them by industry. So if you have a large sales team that's broken down by tech industries and you have some that work with healthcare organizations, you need to make sure that the content that's reaching those different sellers is going to be relevant for the sectors and for the industries that they're focused on, and ultimately freeing their time to do more high value add initiatives such as engaging with their customers. on social. So it's really taking that first step of helping them build their credible brand online, and then teaching them those next steps that they can start to do on social media as well. And the last area there is really around thought leadership. Is how can you leverage advocacy to add on to that personal brand for the leaders you have in your company. We've had amazing success getting C-suite execs onto social and leveraging Amplify to do that, because it's really easy for them in their busy days to just take 2 seconds to log into an app, share that content out, and be able to really see what's going on. And they can even share their own content as well. So if you have people internally who are great writers and sharing blog articles, it's actually a channel through which they can recommend the organization share their most recent blog, and then leverage all of the hundreds and thousands of employees that organizations have to add on to that channel as well. So definitely areas that you want to think of. And I will say on that thought leadership side and getting your executives active on social, I think the security risk there and the areas are far outweighed by the benefit that you can get by getting your executives active on social and just being themselves to some extent. But with that, it is the area where you do want to be most cautious of making sure that everything is set up properly and they know exactly what's going on there. So I want to pass things back over to Spencer for a bit, just to talk, a bit on that security perspective. We talked a little bit of the use cases here and why advocacy is important, but I want to show you that security piece can actually be really simple and really easy to do.
Yeah, thanks, Reed. The example that Reed pulls up there, where they did the internal study, always kind of blows my mind. That you can put a job post for 7 million followers and get more click-throughs simply by giving it to 300 employees of the company. I mean, that to me is absolutely mind-blowing. And I'll also add that ZeroFOX uses, I think Reed mentioned it, it's one of their products, but Hootsuite Amplify is a tool to do this, to automate all this, which is an awesome way of making this totally painless and making these kind of programs really, really effective. And so I think to recap, there's some of these liabilities that Reed and I both mentioned, either from an external perspective that your employees are on social media and they are exposed to this additional risk by using social media. And likewise, from an internal perspective, they may post something non-compliant or against brand standards. But really, at the end of the day, I mean, the huge upside to social selling is that opportunity cost. That you have these employees who want to be advocates for the company, and their combined reach will far outstrip, even the best marketing team's efforts. So you got Hootsuite with this 7 million followers, can really expand their social reach simply by engaging their employees. So the one thing I want to talk about here is another element to addressing the security perspective of employee advocacy and employees on social media is kind of having a comprehensive program. So advocacy is more than just a tool. It's more than just giving your employees the ability to post on your behalf. The customers that we see by far the most success with in rolling out any sort of combined employee advocacy program go through a handful of other steps as well. So if you look at kind of top to bottom a vertical advocacy program, the first thing you got to do is define a social media policy. So this involves setting goals. This involves kind of knowing what you're going to do with your employees, what kind of content you plan to promote, how to use your social channels, right? I mean, these are things that we could fill a whole novel, and I'm sure Hootsuite has written half dozen white papers on, but this is going to vary a ton by vertical, by your revenue model, by your structure. You can imagine something like a law firm who has their lawyers, creating their own books of business. These kind of policies are going to change radically between a law firm and, say, a large media organization that's sending out stuff on behalf of events and new content and new shows and things like that. So this will vary a ton, but this is really important to bake into security as well, because this policy will feed right into training. So when you train an employee on social media, again, you can consider that both the opportunity and the liability of social media. So training your employee at the same time to post things that are non-compliant within brand standards and advocate for the company, you can line that up with trainings on what not to click on social media, how to identify a malicious account, when you should be accepting friend requests and when you should not be, what constitutes professional engagement on social media, and when you should be skeptical of, say, a message you get from a coworker. And these trainings and these policies roll up into kind of what ZeroFOX thinks of as employee protection. So employee protection goes right in line with all those things that Reed was talking about, where you're helping them post on your behalf. By doing that, you're actually protecting your organization, because now you have visibility and control into what your employees are posting and what they're seeing. You have the ability, the lines of communications, I should say, to escalate something if something does go wrong from a security perspective on social media. Having those lines of communication open allow, communication both ways. So it's not just you pushing information out to them, but if something does go wrong, or they're getting feedback about things they're posting, or something comes up that is potentially malicious, that's getting passed back to the marketing and the security teams for review. And that's really, really critical. So another part of protection is kind of making sure that these other two items, policies and trainings, are being updated over time. So employee protection involves looking at those things we talked about earlier, those global security events, and making sure that your employees know when their password should be changed. It's teaching them of, the latest and greatest threats, saying, hey, this is a phishing scheme that's going around Facebook. It's really popular right now. Here's how you can avoid it. Here's what you should do if it does start popping up in all of our social feeds. So that element of protection is absolutely huge. One thing we'll talk about a little bit later is also the ability to automate this. So at the risk of talking about a product too much, being able to have your employees opt into a platform in which they can see things that pop up in their feeds and know that, okay, this is non-compliant, right? This is a malicious link. And those are all things that can be predefined by the marketing and security teams to be rolled out. And this entire process from protection to advocacy is completely automated, which is a really, really powerful thing for organizations struggling with the scope and scale of social media and how to really fully invest effectively on social. So if we had to wrap this up in a single slide, I think this slide does it. At the end of the day, advocacy is protection, and by advocating for your employees, you as kind of the internal team, whether that's security or marketing or some combination of both, get visibility and control into what your employees are seeing and saying on social media. That's an incredibly powerful tool for any organization nowadays. We're going to dive into a couple quick case studies here. So, I want to show a few examples of how this could work in practice, how a kind of combined social media advocacy and protection for your employees can look in the real world. So I'm going to let Reed kick us off with this first example.
Yeah, thanks for that, Spencer. So one of the first examples that we have is really the use case around what law firms are doing today. And we see it a lot because, lawyers, more and more I'm hearing from practices and partners that their clients are not as loyal as you would think, and that if they don't know that your firm does business in the practice area that they're thinking, they're going to potentially shop around for every new piece of business that they need. And so there is a huge imperative to stay top of mind, to show your industry practice areas, and that you do things in not only the sectors that they think about, but maybe even ones that they don't know about. And there's also a huge amount of referral business that we want to keep in mind. And that's true for really a lot of customer-facing and client-facing roles. But what we found was that a lot of the time they were doing this in a really ad hoc way. We've seen examples with companies where their employees were engaging with potentially politically sensitive topics where they really shouldn't be, because it might be seen as them giving advice on areas, or there's things that because how public facing they are for their clients, that some of the people that they were complaining about could potentially be one of their same clients for the firm, and this potentially adds you to a bad really way for the brand impact there. And most importantly was just in the fact that a lot of them just had no real training and education on the best ways to start connecting and engaging with their clients. So it's definitely just something that we wanted to help correct on both fronts. And we've seen success in that because, like I said, one of the main areas I like to focus on is that social selling part. So how did we actually, convert some of those people? How do we help train people within law firms, and even, to some extent, we've done a lot within tax consulting areas as well. And that's because, it's areas where you can really have quite a high impact by training them on what they can say, how they can say it, giving them content in their hands that's pre-approved by your team, talking about your firm, shedding everything in a good light. But oftentimes they didn't even know where to look for that corporate content, which, as marketers can be probably a really frustrating thing to hear, because you're always there creating content, putting it into these areas, and they're like, okay, 2 weeks later they talk to you and say, hey, where did this piece of content go? And you're like, we just went over this. So it's a constant struggle we see in organizations, and one that we're often able to resolve. But not only that, you're reducing those risks of inappropriate comments being made, ones that are potentially slanderous to the firm, prevented from even going live in the first place. You're empowering them to start developing their personal brands, because especially on the lawyer side, people are doing business with people. They're not doing business specifically with your firm. They know their lawyer, they know their accountant, and those are the people that they want to continue to have that relationship with. And so we saw it help drive more business for the firm, referrals being driven, whether it be LinkedIn or whether it be word of mouth, by just being more top of mind with your contacts there. So really great story for that industry that we love to talk to in more detail as well.
Great. So example I want to talk about is a FinServ organization. FinServ, being a highly regulated industry, has kind of a unique approach to social media, because there are all these regulatory issues out there that simply have to be reapplied to social media. So you look at things like FFIEC, like PCI, these are all pre-existing regulatory standards that now need to be considered in this new social media light. So imagine a FinServ organization. They're worried about non-compliant posts going out from their employees, so much like the lawyers, if you have a financial advisor who recommends a stock or, likes a certain page and that's seen as an endorsement. All these little tricks that, you need to be very, very careful of when your employees are posting publicly. Likewise, things coming inbound. So you can imagine someone posting to one of your banker's pages, little old woman who's not entirely sure how Facebook works, thinks she's communicating on a private channel, and she sends something like her social security number or her bank account number publicly on Facebook. These are the kind of things that if that comes inbound to an employee, that's what the risk and compliance team is going to want to know about immediately. From a more pure security point of view, financial services organizations get hit by some of the highest volume of cybercrime out of any industry. So we're talking about, phishing attacks coming inbound, again, fake CFO account, right, reaching out to an employee asking for sensitive documents, all these things that are happening. So you basically have a combined effort from both the compliance and security teams with the marketing team to say, okay, we've got to make sure that our employees are saying the correct things, that they're compliant, that they're on brand standards. And we also want to know when those attacks are inbound and when anything malicious comes into our broader social presence, which includes our employees, of course. And so in this situation, we have what we call ZeroFOX employee protection, which is basically just a way for employees to opt into the automatic security services that we offer on our core products. So basically, what this means is that each employee can go out, register their social media accounts, and we're going to look for things like malicious links. We're going to look for things like compliance posts. We're going to look for things like PII, personally identifiable information, either incoming or outgoing. So if one of your financial advisors posts it out, we're going to say, hey, we think that's a potential compliance violation. You consider taking that down. Or again, if one of their clients posts inbound saying, hey, here's my bank account number, can you help me figure out what's going on? That's going to also alert something as well. Now, if we actually get to the point where there's something overtly malicious that requires help from our security team, right, we can escalate that. So this is put in place, say, for advisors and anyone with privileged access. So that's anyone with access to financial records, critical systems within the organization, admins of the network. These are the kind of people that oftentimes will receive these attacks on social media in an attempt to breach the broader network. So, we roll out ZeroFOX employee protection to these handful of people under the auspices of a employee advocacy program, and we basically get everyone in line. So to finish up here, let's just run through a couple best practices, employing some of these case studies at your own organization and what that would look like, what the step-by-step process is. So first, you really do just have to appreciate both the liabilities and the opportunities associated with social media. And what we mean by that is going back to the beginning of the presentation when, you know, we say, okay, of course everyone's on social media, of course your marketing team absolutely loves it, but we have to respect that there are also risks involved here. And so that's seeing the brand risk, seeing the security risk, and it's also, as Reed got to in his section, looking at the opportunity cost of just how big your social reach can be. Those are both the liabilities and the opportunities. Understanding what that means for your organization is absolutely critical. So knowing which of your employees would sign up for an advocacy program and could post on your behalf, what that broader reach actually looks like is critical. And again, recognizing that giant missed opportunity of not making your employees advocates for the business is huge. Going back to our kind of vertical stack rank of how you deploy an employee advocacy program, we got to set goals, know how to measure success, know kind of what we want to achieve within the vertical and the organizational structure that you're working with, and plan how you grow over time. So this means make sure that you know how you're going to be getting feedback from the program, how you're going to roll it out across different departments. It's not necessarily every single employee on Tuesday is going to start tweeting on our behalf, but it's a slow rollout oftentimes. It's, you know, we're going to test with this department, we're going to see how it works. Something like a business protection, again, we might only deploy that to critical employees like critical access or anyone who's communicating directly with customers. Policy building, training, workforce enablement, protection, those all fall under that building of a comprehensive employee advocacy program. And then, of course, put the right tools and tactics to work. So this is leveraging advocacy tools like Hootsuite, Amplify, and also employee protection tools like ZeroFOX Employee Protection. So to close out, talk a little bit about those two programs, and then we'll jump into Q&A here at the end. So I'll pass it back over to Reed to talk about Amplify.
Yeah, so you know, we talked a lot about how that content can reach all of your employees, and keeping everything really easy for them is going to be key. You know, when we look at the success of employee advocacy, it's generally going to be based on a number of things, but we see it come down to 3 pillars. First, it's going to start with engaging your employees with an easy-to-use solution that houses all of the content that they're going to care about. We've seen, you know, if you're not doing something that's easy for them to use, ideally think about what you're going to be doing in line at Starbucks, when you're going to be waiting in an elevator. Those are those moments where employees have time in their day where they're going to take some time to check their apps that are already on their phone and just share a piece of content or see some of that new internal content that's being put in for them to read as well. And the second pillar is really getting, you know, amplification. It's getting that message out to a larger, diverse audience that's beyond just the core audience that your brand has built out. And that's really, you know, when it comes to sharing that content and what we talked about how different that audience really is from the one you built up from your brand. And finally, it's really about being able to measure those results. When you look at any important thing that social has done for a business, it's going to come down to what it's actually been able to achieve. And so we look at whether that's things like increasing the impressions that you have, but probably more likely it's going to be leading to things that are more top funnel business metrics for you, or bottom funnel there, such as those lead conversions that you're getting, inquiry requests, contact form fills. Those types of results are really the ones that you're going to start to be driving for your business when it comes to that. And just to give you a quick snapshot of what Hootsuite Amplify actually is, it's both a mobile app solution that lives, you know, iPhone, Android, but also accessible via the web. And it's really just about giving them a simple interface where users can go in, scroll through all the content that's relevant for them as individuals, and at the tap of a button, share it out to any of their networks, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, even things like Instagram as well. And some of the things that more advanced users start to be able to do is like edit those posts so they're not just sharing potentially pre-approved canned responses, but they can add their own comments onto those as well if you want them to. That can also be locked down for some of those more, you know, advanced regulatory environments where you need to give them pre-approved ways. And employees, one thing that we find really employees like to do a lot of is actually suggest content as well. So whether it's a great article that they read recently that they want to share out to the admins for the program and say, hey, we should really share this to everybody who focuses on the healthcare industry because it's really pertinent for our space, or just images of what they're doing at community events or speaking at a conference, really a great way to just have them be more engaged with everything as a whole.
Awesome. So I'll chat really quickly about ZeroFOX Employee Protection. We were very, very excited to launch this product actually fairly recently in the past month or so. And what employee protection is kind of the flip side of that equation. It's not just looking at what we should be pushing out to employees, but actually looking at what employees are receiving and making sure that that's not anything malicious or anything that we need to be concerned about from a broader perspective, security perspective. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to have the admin of ZeroFOX Business Protection load an employee list. And again, we don't necessarily recommend rolling it out to your entire organization on day one, but look at who matters most for this kind of a program. So we're looking at finance and ops, we're looking at people who engage with customers like salespeople, we're looking at anyone with critical access like IT administrators, right? So we're going to roll this out to them. They enroll themselves, so they put in all of their own credentials for social media, make sure that everything is hooked up correctly, and this is all distributed to the employees themselves. And then once they're in, we're going to train them on how to use social media safely and effectively. So these are videos that show exactly how you go through, update your security policies, change your settings to make sure that you're only sharing the right things with the right people. This is entirely white labelable, so you can put in things like compliance things that are specific to your organization. You can also add things like internal compliance policies that say this is what we want you to talk about. These are the things we want you to stay away from. We're going to alert on anything that pops up in their social spheres. So say something malicious pops up on LinkedIn, they get a direct message from someone that they shouldn't be with a malicious link inside of it. Well, that's something that we're going to say, hey, heads up, something has gone wrong in your LinkedIn account. And vice versa, say they tweet something that they shouldn't be. Again, they recommend a stop or something like that, and we notice that ticker symbol when they shouldn't be. That's another thing that we're going to alert for them and say, hey, we suggest you should take that down. That's in violation of policy XYZ. All of this is centralized for an IT admin. So anytime that something truly malicious does happen, the employee has the opportunity to escalate that. So say a malicious link is popping up in a bunch of different channels. It seems like it's a targeted attack. That's something they can push to their IT team to pull into their enforcement technology, something like a SIM or a DNS filter that will actually help block those things going forward for all employees. And the other great thing about this is those trainings on best practices also involve things like global alerts. So anytime that something really nasty goes on in the cybersecurity world, right, LinkedIn gets hacked and 10 million passwords are leaked, these are all things that we will push to your employees and say, hey, we highly recommend you update your LinkedIn password ASAP. It's potentially compromised. This all lives in a desktop. So these are things your employees can come in, they can see exactly how they're doing, they can see kind of the state of their risk on social media, and they can stay on top of anything incoming or outgoing that is potentially malicious. So I think that about wraps it up for us. We are going to send a follow-up email shortly here with a couple of different pieces of content. So ZeroFOX put together a comprehensive guide to social media privacy. So this is a step-by-step process for how to secure your social media accounts. Great thing to distribute to employees to make sure that they're on top of their security settings within social media. And then Hootsuite put together this great white paper, The Power of Employee Advocacy, that really walks through all of the benefits of getting your employees on the same page and acting as one unit that's on behalf of your brand. So these things are all going to be sent out in the next few days. Look for them; they're fantastic. I can vouch for them. Thank you guys very much. Last thing we want to do is open it up for questions. So we have a few questions that came in. I'll say these out, and we'll see. I think Reed and I will probably split them about 50-50. So first question we got was, my organization discourages social at work. How relevant is an employee advocacy program for me? Reed, do you want to start with that one? I got some thoughts, but I'll let you start.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we look at organizations like that, it's first just helping them assess why was that put in place. Because oftentimes when we see policies like that, they were set up in like 2007, 2008, well before the time when organizations could actually really easily manage the risks that are out there. So I think now with solutions like like ZeroFOX, it becomes just a no-brainer to how you can help protect employees and guard against those risks. And a lot of the time, those policies may not have ever been revisited. So if you start to revisit those, start presenting a business case of what you can do to prevent that, and also just how easy it will be to help empower your employees and the benefit that the organization is going to get there. And I think we touched on a lot of those reasons today.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is from the risk perspective, not using social media at work is really a Band-Aid on a much larger cut. So usually employees are using social media at home, off the network, and there's a concept in security, BYOD, bring your own device, which basically is to say as employees use their own devices for work activities, you need to be able to extend security to those devices, because if I'm at home, scrolling on my phone and I click something, I still click something, and I bring that into the corporate network, that's still a problem. So not using social media at work doesn't really address a lot of the issues that we talked about at the beginning of the hour, because they still happen on personal time, right? An employee can still go home and do something they shouldn't on social media. An employee can still go home and post something off-brand. So whether or not they're doing it at work almost doesn't really matter. I think these policies are, as Reed mentioned, probably out of date. A lot of organizations are moving in the direction of using and encouraging social media at work, and it's these risks can kind of exist regardless of if you discourage social at work. The next question we got here, this is a juicy one. Can you share best practices for rolling out and training employees on a new advocacy program?
Yeah, I think I'll start with this one here. So when we look at the training employees on an advocacy program, it's a matter of just training them with social media best practices to start. And oftentimes at these organizations, what we'll do is we'll work with a few people in the marketing or sales enablement, depending on who's running this department, to highlight people who are probably already active on social media today and get them sharing some of the best practices that they've experienced and what's worked for them, some success stories. Because when you put it in their own words and they see their own peers actually having success with it, that's really what's going to get them going, is starting with some examples that make it seem really easy. So it's not a matter of, hey, you're going to need to be on Facebook 3 hours out of your workday. You need to make it seem like something that's really simple to do and how it's integrated into your role. So don't position it as something that's completely separate and something that they need to take time out of their day to solely do. Position it as something that's integrated into what they're doing in their day-to-day job. So if they're, engaging with, clients and they just had a great meeting with one, maybe train them how they should be looking for that client on LinkedIn to connect with them there and just share out a quick, welcome or connection request with them. And part that goes hand in hand with that is once you do that, they're going to be looking at your profile, so you should be sharing content and things that are going to be relevant to them in their industry, so that when they look at your profile, they know that they can trust you with their business.
Yeah, I think that's great. The thing I would add this, to Reed's point that, the idea here is to make this kind of as simple as possible for your employee base. The word we throw around a lot that I think we actually didn't mention probably enough in this presentation is the word centralization. So when we think about any of these types of programs, whether it's rolling out social selling through Amplify or business protection or any of these things that we mentioned, the value here is that you're basically centralizing what is previously a very decentralized thing, which is all your employees are out there doing kind of whatever they are doing on social media, for better or for worse. And so by centralizing these things, you're actually taking a lot of the burden off the employees themselves. So that's actually a great way of thinking about this, is you're taking that burden off the employees. You're making it easy on them. Again, they're in Amplify just kind of reposting something, or they log into a business protection once a day to make sure that nothing terrible has happened on their social media accounts. That's a way of making these programs very manageable and very consumable for your average employee. And that actually drives to this next question. I think this is a good one too. Can you discuss some ways to make sure an advocacy program doesn't get stale? So again, I would almost say it's the same answer here. By centralizing these things, you allow for an internal team, say it's your marketing team, to stay at the forefront of these things. Say something changes on a network, right? All of a sudden, God forbid, Twitter lets you post more than 140 characters. How are we going to inform all of our employees of this change? Well, luckily, since it's centralized, you can kind of stay on the pulse of the latest and greatest, again, from a brand perspective and from a security perspective. So if something bad is going on social, well, a centralized team is going to be much more well-equipped to address that for an entire organization than trying to individually train each employee about what's happening. Here's a good one. My organization doesn't produce a lot of its own content. What's a good source for third-party content when we don't have the resources to produce our own? Reed, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a pretty good question, and it goes back to that centralization of a strategy as well. We've actually seen some organizations, when we work with them on that onboarding, we talk about what's going to be your content mix strategy. And sometimes one of the problems that can be there is that most organizations get really excited about the reach of their content and how it's going to help them drive more leads and everything, and that they only share content for their own organization, which can also, it's great for the marketing department, but sometimes it's not the best user experience. Because if you think about the people who are going to be using this program, they have really varying topics that they want to focus on, and they might know a lot of that marketing content as well. So there needs to be a mixture often of third-party content that might be coming in from sources like, trusted news, things like Bloomberg, Forbes, Harvard Business Review has some great content that they produce. And really it's about finding those content channels that are relevant for your industry areas and sharing those back to your frontline employees in ways that they're socially shareable. Because if they're finding content today, they might not have the expertise to craft that into a tweet or into a LinkedIn post. So you can really help them do that. So I'd leverage a lot of RSS feeds would be great for that, so that you can pull in multiple third-party content into one view.
Yep. Having used Amplify here a ton at ZeroFOX, I mean, the spread of content that we get is pretty diverse in terms of third-party content, our own content. But I think, the easy place to start is going back to that thought leadership piece that Reed mentioned, which is if your employees are posting things relevant to the industry, regardless of if you wrote them or not, you're still achieving a ton of those goals and making progress in the right direction. And it's a good place to start maybe before your full content marketing team is up and producing, daily blogs or whatever it is. I think it's about 2 minutes until the hour, so we'll do one last question here. I think this one's for Reed as well. What success metrics would you recommend for a finance organization using an advocacy program for social marketing?
Oh, that's a fun question. So when we look at measuring success, there's two sides that you want to measure success on. One is going to be adoption of the program. So that's how often your employees are engaging with the content you've put in there, how often, how quickly they've been able to get set up. And this is going to rely a lot on the ease of use of platform to make sure that they think it's something that they get value out of. And the second part of that is going to be able to be measuring the actual performance of that content. Because, for multiple reasons, you're going to want to know what type of content does well when you share through your advocacy channels, what pieces of content don't do well, and also what networks your employees are most likely to share content to. I know a lot of businesses come into this thinking LinkedIn is going to be the #1 source, but then are really surprised to see things like Twitter and Facebook really take a larger share of how often their employees are sharing to places. So those are some great things to look into. But I'd also look into some deeper analytics. It's really important to link things like web analytics, such as Google Analytics or Omniture, into your program so that you're tracking lower funnel metrics as well, such as conversions, click-through rates, everything like that gives you, more details on how many goals you're actually completing for the business as well. Beautiful.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank Reed. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I know we're right at the top of the hour, so perfect timing. So thank you guys so much for attending this afternoon. Look out for some follow-up material from us. And thank you guys for joining.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Pleasure chatting.